Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry Bell. We're holding this seminar this morning. I'm based in lovely Harrogate, away from our usual venue of Belfast, where our main office is. We have another office in Leeds. Hopefully everything's good with you and you're well in these difficult times. We held a webinar the other week, which I'm advised was well received. Not the sexiest subject, not just similar to this really. It was about personal guarantees and the effects that that's having in the UK economy there. There's two words we're using here, the B word and the C word. C word is COVID, the B word is Brexit, particularly relevant to what we're going to be talking to here. So I think we've got about 85 participants here, so we'll see how many do join us. And give it a minute if that's okay, and then we'll set off. This should take us about 40 minutes to go through. It's a relatively simple introduction to where we are, and it's where it goes from there. This is not a simple subject because every case is different, but there are basics to apply, and hopefully give you a bit of an insight into what we do. Now, we call ourselves EU Property Solutions, but we've literally dealt with properties across the world. And we've dealt with properties in Hungary, New Zealand, Cape Verde, America, Canada. I think there's about 15 countries we've actually sort of touched base in. And basically, we're working on the premise of our knowledge can be applied in most instances. And there's a particular slide here, how we do it, and we call it the heady mix. Hopefully that'll give a good insight to how we operate. We always encourage clients to get third-party representation. A lot ignore that and go and try and do it themselves, and invariably the polite phrases mess it up. So I'm fairly emotive in the way I deliver things. It might not be the most polished things, but there won't be too many semantics in here. So there's the next slide there. I try not to cuss, but if I get carried away, please forgive me. Always put that down to total lack of breeding. But it's an emotive subject, it's important to people's lives, and it's something we're pretty successful in, and we're driving hard now, especially with COVID-19. It makes sure everything gets recalibrated, if you like, and reset. So that's the nature of what we're doing here. One thing I would ask, if you would consider, Demelia, one of our good ladies, she's going to ping you an email. We're not asking for any money for this. If you feel minded to make a contribution to the NSPCC, Demelia's going to send you a quick link there. We're very committed to the NSPCC and what we do, and they need some money at the minute because of the way the things are going. It's not good. Leaving it with you. Not going to over push it. I wouldn't judge you if you didn't do it. Yes, I would. But if you could see it, if it's a $5 or whatever, that'd be really great. But anyway, it's not a big deal. Okay, a little bit in terms of the form of the webinar here. What we're looking here is, as I said there, we've got to look at the B word and the C word. Massive effect in terms of these two events, if you like. To people that have places in Spain and Cyprus, because that's what this is particularly about. And also the lenders. Let's not underestimate how they're viewing this. Okay, they're not in a great place here, and we liaise with banks and up in certainly possibly the biggest bank in Spain. We're at director level there in terms of some of our cases. So they're not in a great place either. But it's how we're going to do it. So what we're going to do here, we're going to go through a few basics of how we do things. We're going to then look at specifically at some instances and facts on Spain, same with Cyprus, and a couple of examples there. We're also going to be looking at the barroom lawyer, the expert that tells you over a pint that don't worry about it, they can't chase you in the UK. Yes, they can. Yes, they do. And they will get more aggressive in our opinion. We will also touch on loan sales, which could happen, and if they do, it's a whole new landscape. Vulture funds, as they're affectionately known in Northern Ireland, are again, temper the language, not very nice people. They will go for the jugular. They will not mess about if they get loans here, and it's a whole different ballgame. As is the market in terms of what we do is relatively stable, and that's what we need to look at in the main here. A little bit about us. We've got on the slide there, EU Property Solutions and Bell & Company. Bell & Company, if you like, is our mothership. We set that up in 2008 with a property crash, financial crash, full stop, in 2008, 2009. We then developed into EU Property Solutions as the sister company, if you like, because we were finding more and more people also, when they, I don't know, overdosed on property, to really scupper the job, then they went and bought somewhere that wasn't, would be polite again, wasn't fit for purpose. So that's us. We deal with debt negotiation all day. There are 22 of us in our team, dedicated boys and girls, patronising. I can do that because I'm at a certain age, good at what they do, love what they do, and fight, most importantly, for their client. A phrase I use a couple of times in here is that it's all about the stamina. One call doesn't get the answer here. So it's very important that we consider, you know, it's not just technical, it's just not tactical, it's the thirst for the fight, and it's the ability to see things through. So I mentioned there briefly about the NSPCC. If you can see your way to crossing their palm with silver, that'd be great. And then the backdrop that we're working to here is that we're still dealing with the 2006. I call it 2006 because that was when it was really at its height and going crazy. And I often use the analogy that Saddam Hussein could have got money back in the day. Okay, here we know what went on. All right, it was crazy. It's crazy. People getting off the plane, 3 parts cut, signing up for everything, and it's still a huge backlog. It's very hard. There is a question later if we know of the stats involved here, but it's very hard to get to the bottom of it. We tried on a number of occasions. There are people far more learned than us. There's a gentleman I will talk about in a moment, a man called Mark Stucklin, who's the journalist for the journalist on Spanish property homes. He's a writer for the Sunday Times, based in Barcelona there. We spoke to him the other week, and he said, I can't give you the number. It's just not available. I can tell you it's hundreds of thousands. That's in Spain. In Cyprus, it's smaller, but it's still a very prevalent problem. And it's in every sense, it's a completely different scenario, a market, and attitude, very much so. So it's so that's how we're going to run it here. There's a Q&A. There's 5 questions that come in, and I will be answering those. It's difficult to answer specific, so they are going to be a bit general, because part of the work we do is there's a in-depth due diligence, and I can't give an answer. I have 100 grand. Can I get away with it? We don't know. Okay, not that you would get away with it, but we need the detail there. So if there are other questions over and above, there's my direct email address. I think Noel, who's my assistant in this, so if this goes wrong at any point, it's Noel's fault. It's contact us, chat away, call. Not selling anything. If you want us to act, that's cool. But just that's the form of this, how we're delivering this webinar. Okay, so COVID-19. Everybody knows what's going on there, and the terrible plight that it's put across Europe, particularly, and America now, and it's really taken a grip here, and Spain. Okay, and the deaths are awful. We're looking at the backdrop, hopefully, obviously, now that we're all coming out of that. But what that's done for us, it's as a business in every sense, is, like I said, is to recalibrate. In part of that, what we're looking at here is particularly the demographic of our clients. Okay, so if you said the average person that was buying in 2006 was, say, 50, obviously now they're 64. So we've got a number of retired, worried clients who we look to protect. No one is getting younger. This is a 2006 problem onwards, and it's how then it's going to be dealt with in the immediate term here. So we always would say this, but if people are contemplating this, it is something to get on with. We're now getting, unfortunately, some people who are passing and having a Spanish or Cypriot or anywhere negative property in an estate is a disaster. Absolutely. I think I sound like Craig Revel Hall there. It's absolutely a disaster, darling, right? It's shocking. To try and unravel it, to get banks to engage and or solicitors to engage across jurisdictions and not necessarily up to speed, along with executives who are very nervous because they don't want exposure themselves, is really tough. So we actually have one client, bless him, he's infirmed, he's terminally ill. He just wants this sorted so that his estate doesn't have to carry this baggage. And he, a really nice guy, but in terrible form, bless him. If he is listening, good luck, Charlie. We'll see you soon. So in terms of so the demographic is there, right? Then you've got the market. So you've got the locals and we've got the second home market, okay? So typically for most of the audience here, I'm pretty sure it's going to be about Brits and Irish who made a mistake, let's put it that way, invested in this, and now as we go on, There was a bit of a lift in the second home market in this, the typical golf resort type properties in Murcia, say, and the Manilvas of the world, and now they've made that mistake. So it's how they're going to extricate. COVID-19 has, I think, taken away any sales market for the year. I see Spain's opening, but I don't see a deluge of people thinking we're going on holiday in Spain, and B, I'm thinking about buying there. There will be the guys looking for the value, and the very fact that your property's on the market, you've got to sell it in this period, will attract a certain type of buyer, potentially sort of sharps. So that's going to go on. In terms of the second home market, there was a bit of an increase in there as well as the prices went down, because then the Spaniards were looking to buy typically properties that usually would only appeal to Brits and Irish. So sales and values will, in the immediate term, only go one way. How far they go, nobody knows. But if I wouldn't want to be a valuer at the minute, trying to go out to a property and put a price on something when I've got essentially no buyers or very few buyers. Lenders approach, we are regularly in contact with lenders, and not always having a punch up. We do talk away, discuss things, how are they finding things, everything. And two things that seem to have come to, I think, they're quite frightened and angry, which sounds a strange mix. They're frightened in that they've got a problem which is most likely 12 plus years old, i.e. the last crash, and they haven't resolved that. Then they've got the effect that COVID-19 is going to have on the world economies, whatever form it takes, V-shaped, U-shaped, L-shaped, whatever shape you want. And then it's a case of saying they don't know what's coming from that. So if there have been sales from 2015, how are they going to affect it? So that's a worry for them. They're angry with themselves, and they're angry with people that won't engage. And that may ramp up in terms of what they do here. They've tried to, in the main, they may shout and holler, but in the main, they're not too fussed on litigation. They're not averse to it, but it's not their first call. They have the issues of the Spanish courts and Cypriot courts, where there are any number of issues in trying to get judgments, but frightened and angry covers it quite well. Mr. Stuckland has just joined, I've noticed there, in the participants. I'm just putting up there. If you are interested and you want up-to-date analysis of anything and market trends, everything else, two websites, obviously, for the two countries coming in. Mark runs an excellent website called Spanish Property Insight. By the way, we advertise on that, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. And then there's Nigel Howarth I think he's in Limassol, Nigel, and he has Spanish Property News. But good, wouldn't spend your life reading it, sorry, Mark. But I would say, if you want definitive advice, if you love a chart, if you want to follow the trends and find out, Mark and Nigel are your people. So that's our slide on COVID-19. If Noel is still awake, good. Thank you, Noel. Noel is our host, that's why he's running the slides. So a little bit of an indication of how we approach cases, and I refer to it as a heady mix because every case is different. There are parameters that we work in. There are banks that we know will work in certain ways. There are banks that we know will be complete bastards. We know there are solicitors who shout to everybody and everything else. We had a client recently got a letter from a city firm, EC4 London address, top address, etc. 5 pages of threats, and they forgot actually what they were writing about, what they weren't going to do to our clients. So that's why I say every case is different. The major point here, right, is making sure that the client is realistic. It's disappointing that they may have made a mistake. They may be scared, and they would have done very well, let's say, in the UK property market on their home and anything else. They are cashing or have cashed their pension, so they will be flush. But if they carry baggage, if you like, in terms of this mistake they made, then it's very difficult to deal with. There is an inquiry in terms of missold. There's missold and there's missold. Missold, undoubtedly, across Spain and Cyprus. We'll come to Swiss franc mortgages in Cyprus later. They were missold by today's standards. Will you win if you took a case on a general, if you went to Sabadell, if you went to Alpha Bank, whatever, and tried a missold action in Spain? To my mind, not a prayer. Going back to our demographic, he's 65. Do you fancy a 5-year legal battle that you may lose and wipe yourself out of funds? I don't see it. In terms of Cyprus, there are a couple of class actions against banks in terms of Swiss franc mortgages. We have a good, strong legal support there in Cyprus. And one of my colleagues was speaking to George yesterday, and he said they've got a prayer. They've got a prayer. They can get tied up in court forever and a day, with not on a racist basis, but if you try and take on foreign Johnny tries to come in and start throwing the weight around, especially us Brits, not viewed generally by the world well, and I think you'd really struggle. If it changes, we'll keep you posted. There are people working in the UK that are working well in mid-sole mortgages, but trying to do something for FAR, I think, is very difficult. So we need a realistic client. If a client says, right, I paid 150 for it, I want 150,000 back, I put £50,000 deposit on it, I want that back, isn't going to happen. I was missold, you were, nicest way, get over it. I'm thinking about going to class action. That's your option. I don't think you'll get very far. We've had a couple of cases that have come out of class actions, more than a couple actually, in Cyprus, and we've gone to the bank and got a deal on it to get them out of where they were. And one was a substantial one with about 500,000 euro owed on that property. So then the other thing we have in our head mix are strong team structures, both in Belfast and Leeds, in terms of the people that deal with the cases. UK solicitors, I put their local on the ground and UK support. Very important when it cuts up rough and the legals start to fly. We don't want to go into any litigation in any of these cases. We don't want to defend. But if they start the fight, you've got to be ready to defend yourselves. And essentially, all we ask our legal teams is to either liaise with the bank and get it sorted, or leave the door open so that we can get back and talking to them. And more and more that we deal with the banks, with that second approach where they keep the door ajar for us to carry on talking, is the approach. We need to do, we always do on every case on both our companies and other brands we're developing, due diligence is absolutely imperative. We need to know their, excuse my parlance, financial inside leg measurement. We need to know what they've got there. What is at risk? What is their exposure? And not for nosing sake, we need to make sure what we're trying to cover here, right? Because if you're drawing down, if you owe £150,000 to a Spanish or Cypriot bank, and you owe them 150 and you're drawing down 150, you have a problem. Okay, so it's nothing untoward. It's just positioning it right, but you can only do that with the required amount of due diligence. And like I say, know the exposure. Final point here, cliche. Any number of people have come to us. This is how we give them full explanation what we can do, full cost structure, which isn't cheap, I hasten to add, but it's not an easy job, but is stamina. So they come, this is how we're going to do it, right, off into the sunset, never see them again, and go to the bank. Make one representation, the bank say, go away, and they come back to, well, you said that could be done, and it can't. Banks aren't ever going to take your first answer. Banks could go legal. We have cases from the last crash we're dealing with in loan sales in Ireland, in Bell & Company, which has been going on for 8 years. Hopefully we're going to get 2 of those out the way this week. And you need that, as an undertaker in this sort of case, you need to have that stamina. We have accountants in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and the Republic there who take on these sort of cases, right? The debt chasing cases. Cool. That's fine, but no, it's going to be all consuming. It's not, I'll do an hour a month on it. If somebody jumps, you've got to be ready to react. So stamina is required in this. And look, I'm not a patient person by any stretch, but you need patience. Sometimes letting somebody sit there and sweat a bit, the bank that is, doesn't always hurt. But tactically, it's what you have to build it, and never give up. You can never give up. So something we don't do. On EU and on Bell & Company, on EU, sorry, we will never take a case on we can't win. In EU, there are always risks, but we will mitigate nearly every risk first before we take that case on. So again, that comes into the heady mix there. So well done marketing there, getting a fluttering flag there. I hope you're all appreciating the graphics there. So Spain, that is our main market. And to say, we've been advised by people far more learned than us, there are still hundreds of thousands of properties to deal with there. I mentioned earlier about the banks being frightened and angry. Yep, 2006 sales, 2005 sales. are causing still issues in today's world. Quite a bit of that is becoming apparent, or it did on the 10-year anniversary of a lot of those mortgages. And I think the next wave is the 15-year mortgages, where they were interest only and now reverting to repayment. So we have a client that resolved her situation, a lady called Jill, who's a fine exponent of what we do, always available for a telephone testimonial. Her repayments, going from interest only to repayment, went up fourfold. And she was a lady of a certain age, back to the demographic, doesn't work in a year of Sundays. So the banks still have this issue, and it's there. Their attitudes change. And every bank is different. They have different approaches. Sure, they talk about, you get the aggressive ones, you get the relaxed ones. They're still going to come for you. You get the litigious banks. You get all sorts. But generally, it's almost as though they're tired of it. We've had extensive chats with various banks, Cyprus and Spain, and they really want it resolved. If you go to the average guy that's dealing with this in the banks, they just want it off their desk. It's a pain in the backside. They just want rid. In Spain, that's definitely the case in terms of the older stuff there. And we've got that we deal with our legal team there. And there were banks, when we kicked this off, that our solicitor referred to them as whether it's right or wrong, as the mafia. They just took such a hideous approach. But as we all do, as I said, I'm a man of a certain age, we all mellow. And we again, we're in for the long run here. This is in and out cases. Some of these take a while. Some of them are relatively quick. But we keep abreast of attitudes and changing trends in the banks and policies. There is, just whilst we're here, there was the scandal of the deposits that were lost in Spain. With a number of the cases that we're working on, which are pretty difficult, usually quite tasty numbers, but pretty difficult. Not selling anything. We work on a no-win, no-fee basis, and there is the last call for these. The window for this is closing in October 2020. So there's 3 or 4 months. If you know anybody that's got a deposit that they lost back in the day, give us a shout or look around. But if it's information only, but the last chance of those looking to start any litigation to recover those, and it is a litigious process, is October 20. So that's a very basic review of where we are with Spain. I say it's our main market. We nearly know what we're talking about, and it's quite couldn't call it an interesting case, because unfortunately it involved a lady who passed away. But it shows again the issue with the demographic. So this was a lady who had a nice house near London. She passed. We obtained data from Land Registry that said a Spanish bank had a charge on her property. So we contacted her, and she didn't come back to us. Bless her, she passed away, and then her sister had to step in as the executor to sort out her affairs. She didn't even know her sister had a property in Spain, and it transpired the reason she didn't know, she was the deceased lady was ashamed of the mistake she made, which was terrible thing to go to your grave to with. So the first thing, the executor and or the mourning sister, she was with a letter from a very aggressive firm of solicitors, the same firm that we were talking about earlier, and demanding 101,000, or they were going to look for the repossession of the home. This 102,000 pounds sterling came after one of the few repossessions that went through a sale to auction, and it left essentially this bill. Okay, so we were appointed because the executive just wanted this out of the way. One way or another, if they had to pay the 102, they were going to pay the 102. So there was a good lump of equity in there. I think there were children involved in terms of beneficiaries and everything else. So long story short, the solicitors came out all guns blazing. We went back and respectfully, in far better parlance than this, but said Foxtrot Oscar, took them on a bit. Eventually you get to, shall we talk? Should we stop shouting at one another? Shall we talk? Yep, okay, you get talking. Long story short, we got to a case where they settled, including our fees as well in this matter, for 17,500, and the charge was removed from the property. So that now releases the property so that the executor can get on with what they're supposed to do, and the beneficiaries can the beneficiaries benefiting from the sale of that property. So that was good. But it goes back to that thing of the demographic, the mistake made. This lady took it very badly, which is understandable to a degree, but pretty sad case, but half decent outcome in the end for the estate. So then we're going to look at Cyprus. Another lovely flattering flag again, and a completely different market, completely different issues, negative equity still at it, but in terms of what's actually going on there, the graphic, it says everything. Okay, let's deal with the graphic, and as I called it there, hopefully nobody's upset by anything, calling the Swiss franc mortgage the Antichrist. If I have, apologies. But what has happened here is these were missold, end of, and there are class actions trying to rectify that again, which I say I don't think have got any chance of success. Now, what happened here was in 2007, the average currency rate, Swiss franc to sterling, was about 130. Today that stands, sorry, it was 170, other way around, 170. Today that stands at about 120. So you've got about a third, Swiss francs appreciated by a third. That in turn has increased whatever loan was at that time by a third. You've got that backdrop, and obviously similar to the Spanish thing in terms of the overvaluing, sometimes poor quality of the developments, the value has dropped as well. So suddenly we get that swathe of red to the right of that graph, which sees an expanded potentially negative equity situation. Now, the market in Cyprus is pretty stagnant. If Nigel's listening, he may agree or disagree. That's our opinion. It's difficult to sell properties in Cyprus because you always have the issue of land registry. And our approach to here is generally banks shout, as they always do to start with, but they're in, well, we feel sorry for them, but they're in a fairly invidious position in that they cannot sort out the legals. Land registry is not fit for purpose. They keep making improvements slowly. And that should have been sorted, because when there was the bailout, I think it was 2012, when the IMF took all the money off the Russians, one of the requirements was sort your land registry out, but still the problems exist. I was, I think it was about a year or so ago, I was in Cyprus, and it's still amazed that you see in shop windows or estate agent windows telling us that you could buy this property because the deeds were available. And that was in capitals. That was a big selling feature. I'm a bit old-fashioned. I would like some deeds if I bought a property, but that's the issue still there. If it comes to selling a property there and the deeds aren't sorted, you've got everyone at the trough. The old developer, the council, possibly the architect, the solicitor, the client is last on the list. Everybody's got their hand out if you're trying to sort out some deeds there. So there was a parliament, somebody used the other day and heard from it. It's a bit of an Elm Street. It's a nightmare. So it's not good. With that backdrop, the banks, primarily Greek, obviously, or Greek-based, or Greek-linked, they are at best limping along. With this scenario, with the old debt here, they're not as quick in terms of reaction as our Spanish friends, and it must be a soul-destroying job. Not feeling sorry for them, but they're limping along in every sense. They don't know how to take things on. At the beginning of this, they were very litigious, firing writs out of Nicosia, which were stupid because they were the easiest thing in the world to defend, but it was trying to catch people off guard, because we'll come to a point in a minute when we talk about they can't chase me at home, can they? Yes, they can. So what they're not in a good place. They're not a good place. They're okay to deal with. These are slow, laborious cases, but you just got to go through it. We can shout and holler all we like about the Swiss franc mortgage, but as we say there, the class action, to my mind, you've absolutely no chance. And yet they'd have been going on for years already. So one day maybe, but I don't see it. So that's a quick backdrop on Cyprus. Then this hopefully it brings in terms of the tactics that were involved here with the settlement we achieved in Cyprus. So the client had a £150,000 mortgage. The place in today's terms was worth about 80,000. This is sterling figures I'm using here, not the Cypriot pound, and it was sold on the basis that it would be great rentals, etc., etc. The rentals are low. I think it was even a guaranteed rental in this, which didn't stand any scrutiny, and there was erratic rental income. Obviously, now the rental income we're starting to see as well. Generally, foreign properties, they're going to struggle here. If you're reliant on the rental income, you're going to lose a good year's rentals in terms of COVID-19 again. So our client was okay, doing well in the UK, had a number of buy-to-lets, but had this thing which was a pain in the neck. This had the nightmare, as I called it earlier, scenario of the deeds. Okay, so we went to the bank. We could have sold it. It would have taken forever and a day and cost a small fortune. We were quite fortunate in this one that we got speaking to the bank, and they were in negotiation with their developer, who still strangely had an interest in the property, even though it had been repossessed. And they wanted to use the properties to go back and, if you like, attack the developer. So we said, well, if you speak very quite nicely to us, we will engage with you. But they also wanted, I think they wanted on this one, 35,000. No, they asked for the full amount first, but then they got it down to 35,000. And at the end of the day, we paid the bank 13,000. And yes, there was legal documentation, but it's the old classic of there are keys, knock yourself out. So that's what happened there. The sales costs weren't incurred. The drip Chinese water treatment process of trying to sell a place in Cyprus was avoided. And relatively quick, one of the quicker cases for sure that we dealt with in Cyprus, and our client getting on with his life and hopefully collecting his rents as we speak. In the UK with his 15 buy-to-lets. So that was our example of Cyprus. And then the great barroom phrase, and a lot of people pick this up if it suits their argument. Okay, they can't chase me. I'm a bit of a swine for this. I'm going to change the agenda around slightly. The B word. Okay, so there's massive uncertainty about Brexit. One of the things I'm pretty sure that won't change in terms of our negotiations, as long as we don't all fall out completely, is that there will still be the provision under various EU directives to do cross-border chasing of debts and enforcing litigation and judgments. I'm 95% sure that will happen. So they can't chase me? Oh, yes, they can, and they will do. Okay, and they will continue. And if they get more aggressive, and if there are loan sales and vulture funds, that will become more and more prevalent. It's particularly the case, and I'm surprised more banks don't use it. If they've got any representation in the UK, it's quite easy for them to start litigation in the UK on these matters. And they will chase. They will chase. If you've got away with it so to date, something else will knock on the door one day, because even if they were repossessed in 2012 and sold and everything else, and no one's chased you, as and when they tidy up their affairs, the banks, and get through and start looking at what is left, they will then sell the absolute dross of their loan book to what can only be described as animals with a capital A. Loan sales, loan sharks, loan sales to vulture funds, as I say there, makes it a whole bigger issue. They won't go, yeah, go on, then we'll take 13,000 in terms of that case in Cyprus. They will come at people if they've got a debt that says they're owed 100 grand. They will undertake their own due diligence to make sure they get as close to that figure as possible. They may take a few views along the way, but different issue. So, as I always say, engagement with your third-party representation. If you don't want to use us, that's up to you, but make sure you have proper representation. Trying to deal with a bank direct and/or litigation is crazy, right? You need some sort of buffer. You need legal representation as long as you get somebody who knows what they're talking about, which is a completely different subject. Any solicitors that are listening, close your ears. Not a great fan of solicitors. Sometimes they forget what they're actually there for. But that's the ones we've used. We've kissed lots of frogs along the way. So engagement is vital. Even if you can't meet the debt, even if you can meet the debts, just make sure you pop your head against the parapet. We had a guy there that came to us, and I think he had about 30 unopened envelopes from Bankia in Spain. Not great, but once we got in touch, it changes it. They have a little rant. The client didn't engage with it. Yeah, sure. The client didn't, yeah, you said that. Do you want this sorting, or should we just keep going on about the client didn't engage? So that's imperative. And as I say, third-party representation, whoever it may be, as long as it's your property solutions, it's absolutely vital. Loan sales will, I believe, become more and more prevalent. They happened after the last crash, particularly in Ireland, and we're dealing with a few around Europe at the minute. We've got one there in Holland we're dealing with at the moment, and it's going to be the way forward. So it's a way for the banks to recover something that they're not necessarily capable of doing. Through COVID-19, I'm pretty sure we'll see back maybe 5 or 6 years' time, a lot of loans being sold by the banks here. and or peer-to-peers and all the other fintech platforms. So the Brexit word, okay, so that brings us uncertainty all round. So there, in terms of if we're thinking of our clients thinking of saying, right, when Brexit comes, it's head down, I'm okay, they can't chase me. I don't think that's right. But on the flip side, financial institutions, particularly in Spain, are concerned about Brexit and their ability to carry on doing what they're doing, because it's more based on people's attitudes. They think they will harden. It will be, excuse my French, but get stuff, Johnny Foreigner, we're on our own here. And so that's not going to win the argument, but it's a difficult matter anyway. But the foreign banks, being UK based, they're concerned with this. They're concerned. It's the attitude and the fight that may come back. So it's not good either way. It's very concerning. As I'd say this anyway, but doing nothing is not an option. Ignoring the issue, moaning about it, time comes very quickly. Ignoring a bank is not very bright, even if you're, as long as you're polite, ring up, tell them to sod off. You know, it's not an option. Do not let post gather up or just stick it straight to recycling. I would implore anybody to engage, speak to somebody about it. If you don't want to do it, get somebody to do it. If you to speak to somebody, share the problem. It's like anything. Debt is not a very nice thing. We've had a lot on mental health in a minute, but debt is the worst. It's 24/7. It's worse than a stone in the shoe. It's a bloody rock in the shoe. So it says you just don't leave it. Don't do nothing. Like my grandmother used to say, don't talk like you don't write. Conclusion. So we're going to draw a close. I've got a bit of Q&As. I think there are half a dozen questions or so at the end, which I'm going to go through. If you've got any specific questions, because this is a sort of fairly generic delivery, because it has to be, because the cases are very detailed and confidential. I'm mindful of that. I'll just quickly run through a bit of conclusion here. So we've got the demographic, which we've laboured, and the estate issues if people do pass. Also very difficult if a property is jointly owned and one of the couple have passed away. Very hard for obviously the grieving, but also trying to resolve the legal and financial issues from there are really bad. Okay. The next point there I made, one of my legal friends told me that maybe I should put the word in porky pies. Okay. Again, you get clients that run off to the bank, say, you said they'd say this and do that, right? No bank is going to tell you, yeah, we could consider it. And it's especially the case if you're paying your mortgage as you go along. So if a bank gives us some BS, we'll tell them. If a solicitor talks garbage, we'll tell them. If they're right, we'll accept that. We say it's not just a punch up here, but if it's the odd porky flies about is the polite phrase here. So, and again, that can only really be gleaned from having third party representation. Cross jurisdictional skills are huge here, and this is back to that heady mix that we've developed, and it's knowing what they can do on the ground wherever the property is, also versus wherever you are. And we're developing our model now to cover Germany, clients who have issues in Germany and in the Nordic countries. And we have to get that jurisdictional side covered first, so we know what can and can't be done. And it's that whole approach is vital. Going back to the due diligence as well. It's that, keep saying the phrase, but it is the heady mix. And it's something we've developed over 7 or 8 years that we've dealt with the EU, and the 15 odd years that I've been scrapping with the banks, particularly in Ireland, but now in the UK. Bit patronising next phrase, right? If you want to sort it, get over yourself, right? If you think I put 50,000 down at such a loss, okay, it's gone. I owe 150,000, so it's worth 150,000. It ain't. It's a clear mind. You need to attack this. You're not going to do it otherwise. Obviously, it's about money, but it's making sure that you are mentally attuned to what you're trying to do here. If it's a moaning, we wouldn't take you on. End of. Okay, it's just, that's just not what we do. We need engaging clients. We're not patronising them in terms of that was a stupid buy. When you get a number of clients say, why did I do it? Why did I do it? Again, get over yourself. You made a mistake. You're trying to get rid of it. It's very important that the mind is clear. Don't leave it. It definitely won't get better. Going back, not to spook anyone. If these loan sales do culminate, as I think they will over time, that's not going to make the job any easier for sure. And also the values could go again, will be more advised by our learned friends at Spanish Property Insight and Cypriot Property News. They know their stuff there, but the price aren't going to get better. Ain't going to get better in the immediate term. We have if anybody has got anything they want to introduce us or discuss, we have a pretty rudimentary introduction fee that we pay. Been nicely dressed up. There's introductory affiliate program. If you introduce somebody and they come on board, we we pay for introductions. That's no problem at all. I'll leave you with one little sales pitch before we go into the Q&A, and that is, why would you use EU Property Solutions, right? Our USPs are technical. We know our stuff. We know the cross-jurisdictional issues. We know the financials. Most importantly, it's the tactical approach we take to each and every case, because that is vital. It's not, this isn't one suit fits all, right? It's not 100 suits that fit all, right? We have guys that come to us who write the check out for the balance, the shortfall. You know, they had the cash available. We managed to get them an excellent deal instead. We have people who are really struggling but must get rid of it, so we help them through if they have to raise a bit of money to tidy it up. It's different ways, but every case different. And going back to the old stamina word, buckets of stamina, not just stamina. You need buckets of stamina in this. It's not easy. It seems like it when we get a deal and we may post, oh yeah, we're saying there's a fortune here, a fortune here. A lot of work has gone in the background. Very often, financials, legals, banks, other legals, everything else, right? And following the case through and helping the bank. Sometimes the banks need help through some of these situations, which isn't as patronising as it sounds. Sometimes it's particularly in Cyprus, and it happens in Spain. Can you get this for me? Can you do that for me? And we talk. That's where we get our dialogue, and we get our updates, our information from. So that mix there is very important. We're technical, we're tactical, which is the most important of buckets of stamina. I would never give. I'm not an idiot. I don't run into a brick wall 50 times and think I can't get through that wall. But if I think there's a case and we can do it, we'll do it. That's our approach across the board. EU Property Solutions and Bell and Company. So rather than you having to whitter on to me, and I say there's a couple of contact details at the end. If you've got any specific inquiries, right, fire an introductory email and whatever you want to do. Come to us. We'll chat about it. If you want to go and do it, if you want to introduce, we'll look at everything. This is introducing us. This isn't selling us. That's what we're trying to do with our webinars. So we had one with personal guarantees, which was quite hot and heavy for some people afterwards, which is interesting because it stoked a bit of debate. So these are 5 questions that have come in, right? Now, hopefully we'll have answered this. Are banks doing things differently? Every bank takes a different approach to each and every, the technical phrase is delinquent debt. Okay, some hide it under the carpet, some attack it. Every bank is different. If we don't know how a bank's going to react, so it's a new bank on the radar, we will go and test them out first, and we'll research them to within an inch of their life. We'll talk to them. Very often they're keyboard warriors and don't like to talk, but you do glean such and what if you can get. Every bank is differently. They will have same sort of premises and structures within, but in terms of delinquent debt, that's the position. We actually call a director that we deal with in Spain, they're 3D, he's the delinquent debt director. Doesn't translate Spanish like that, but it makes us, we always call him Mr. 3D. Right, how much are owed by UK and Ireland nationals? Is that right? Okay, there will be, I'd suggest, billions of pounds and euros outstanding in this. We were discussing with one bank a book of about 3,000 cases that were nigh impossible for them to solve. There was no engagement with the client. There are legal issues in terms of the properties. There were legal issues with the court. Everything was a disaster. But if you look at that at 150,000 a go, that is 450 million on a very small book. It's a major problem still with them, and an increasingly major problem. When the financial crash came in 2008, the banks all, the equivalent of the Bank of England, the Bank of Spain, the Bank of Cyprus, they were bailing out banks all over. You know, we had our situation with RBS, Ulster Bank, etc. And they bent over backwards. Now they've gone full circle. And in Spain, for instance, they're talking about making banks lodge with the central banks funds to cover books, such as that 3,000 one I referred to there. So it is a major problem. But it's what we work on all the time. It's checking where their appetite is. I think when things start to go wrong in this second cycle with COVID-19 in terms of the effect on the financial climate, the banks will get most likely aggressive again. It won't solve anything, but they may get more aggressive again. So it's a big problem for them. The figures aren't out there in terms of how much is owed. We just can't get to it. We've tried in many ways, but it's a huge problem for the banks, and that's what we work on. It doesn't mean they roll over, but it's a big problem for them. If you don't have any assets in the UK, what can they do to? There's no way to pay them. They'll keep going at you, most likely with a bit of litigation. You might want to tell them they're wasting their time, which they may or may not take on board. If that was the case, I'd most likely say, right, I'll tell you what, here's an affidavit of where I am. I've got nothing. There's always the option of petitioning for your own bankruptcy, just to get it out of your hair. If you haven't got a house, that could well be an option. At least it gets rid of it forever and a day. But there's not a lot they can do, but they may still keep going. Then if they sell that onto a loan company, they'll come again, and then you get loans being sold onto other loan companies. So it's not a lot they can do to you in terms of take off you if you've got nothing, but it doesn't necessarily go away. So I'd say we deal with a number of bankruptcies, a bit like being a financial undertaker sometimes. But it's not the worst thing, though. It's there for creditors to get money off you, or it's there to you to avail of the protection of the courts so that they can't harass you anymore. So that's what that place is there. Do EU property solutions deal in missold mortgages and or compensation? Now, this I looked at. So in terms of the preparation of this webinar, we generally said no. But there are more specifics in terms of this inquiry, I know, which I've gone back to the gentleman in question here. One of my colleagues has and says, we'll come back and chat about it because it's not your average broker sold a dodgy one. There's a bit more to it. In terms of compensation, again, there's a little bit more to it, but I still stand by my argument trying to take an average mortgage to court to go at the lender because it was missold. It's going to be nigh and impossible. Compensation is particularly hard in Spain. If you go back to the deposits, that should have been a relatively easy process in that the Supreme Court in Madrid in 2015 said, pay these out. Here we are with cases 4 or 5 years old, still not settled, and compensation suddenly becomes the eye of the beholder. Again, repeating, not being racist, Foreign Johnny isn't viewed very well when he tries to have a fight in the backyard of Spain or Cyprus with the courts. A final question. I gave my keys back to the bank in Spain and they're asking for 75,000 to settle. Why? Because there's a shortfall. There are costs. They may have accumulated all the interest. There have been a number of instances where you found that people have either been told or misconstrued the fact that you hand back your keys and that's the end of it. Unless you've got at worst a letter from the bank saying that's us done and dealt, and you should have an actual legal document that said the matter's closed. Otherwise, it's live. If you were told by a bank official that's it, unfortunately, that's not right. You are still liable to any exposure on any debt. It goes back to the thing, 2012, so it's gone away. 2015, it's gone away. It hasn't, and it will keep coming. One way or another, it will come back and darken your door. If you get away with it, brilliant, but very few cases do. So that's the end of the questions. There's a couple of contact details there that Noel's going to ping up if you can use and abuse. Hopefully it's been of some interest. It's 50 minutes of your life you may not get back, but we're trying to put across a bit of a message. We know what we're doing. There's my personal email address. There's my personal mobile number. I have the odd thing on. If you want to contact us, do us a favour, just touch base first, and I'll come back to you definitely within the day. But if you've got questions, put them across to us. If we don't know the answer, we'll go and get them for you, or as best we can. So hopefully that's been of some use to you. I didn't let myself down too much with the effing and jeffing, so I'll say goodbye and thank you for your time. Cheers. Goodbye.